Hi everyone, Olivia Reiner here for Packers News, joined by Tom Silverstein. And you wouldn't know it, but I would say today's weather marks the official start of football weather, I guess. It's not the start of football season, but it truly feels like football outside.
Yeah, it's not winter. Winter doesn't start till December 21st. But it sure feels like it.
Yeah, I would say it's
snow
winter.
on the ground. I don't even want to think about it.
I don't either, man. There's nothing good about that. Snow, unless you are the Green Bay Packers and you've got visiting teams coming in here that are not used to the snow. However, Carolina gets some pretty cold weather.
I'm not even sure how much that's an advantage anymore for the Packers. It used to be when they were, in the 90s, Ron Wolf used to get guys who he called mudders, guys who weren't terribly fast, but they were tough and they could play in really lousy conditions. And now the Packers are more of a, high-powered, finesse kind of offense. They don't run the ball 30, 40 times a game. So I don't know. I don't know that it's a huge advantage to play here. Not like it used to be, but, I think it's an advantage if you're playing Oakland or the Rams or Tampa Bay or something like that.
Well, last weekend certainly wasn't an advantage for the Packers playing in the warm weather. I mean, that was a brutal game. If anything, the LA, whatever it was, being there was unlike anything we've seen from them this season.
The aura succumbed to the aura of
Perhaps.
LA. I don't know. It was one of those duds that every NFL coach goes through. And sometimes you can't really pinpoint exactly what it is. All you can do is go back and point out the mistakes and try to get your team, get the ship righted. But, LaFleur made a couple of changes this week, one of which was going back to having a Wednesday practice, which I think was smart. I think having the walkthrough on Wednesday may mentally get you sharp, but I just think football players are made to practice. And the more they practice, the better they are. And I think that was part of the reason they had sort of foregone practicing on Wednesday. They were just doing walkthroughs for 3 straight weeks, maybe, I think it was. So they were back to practicing in full today.
Well, not only did they practice today, but they also practiced in the snow.
Yeah.
So for the opening portion of practice, when we are allowed to be inside, we were not actually outside in the snow. They moved outside to the outdoor field a little bit after that. But,
and I don't think it has snow on it.
There was snow. It was snowing.
It was snowing, yeah. Usually they plow it and they have heated coils underneath that, so they never have to.
But getting out in the elements a little bit more.
But, yeah, they were out in the cold, and that's good. Yeah, you need to get acclimated.
So why don't we go into Wednesday's injury report? There's not a whole lot to discuss. The only guys that did not practice at all were Adrian Amos, Jimmy Graham, Tramon Williams. Tramon Williams, that was a veteran rest.
So was
Jimmy Graham. And so the only real injury there was Amos, and that was for a hamstring.
Yeah, and that I wasn't aware of. I thought he finished the game. I don't recall him coming out.
I don't either. The others that were on the injury report as limited were Devontae Adams, Brian Bulaga, Kevin King, Robert Tonyan, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So there is...
Not much there.
Yeah, no, nothing super alarming or big concerning out there. We did notice today, so Preston Smith had some sort of wrap around his wrist and hand, his left wrist and hand, and I figured maybe that would impact him and his status on the injury report, and he was a full participant today in practice, so worth noting that he's got some thing on his hand, but it doesn't appear to be limiting his participation whatsoever. So there's that.
Okay, yeah, not much to report.
No. So anyway, let's head over to Facebook. As always, we are live on Periscope, YouTube, and Facebook. Hello, guys. Hello, Tim. I'm taking questions on Facebook as I usually do. Let's start with Jerron here, our good friend who is a top fan. Thank you. I don't really know what that means. We have some designated commenters on here that says they are top fans in Facebook. So I don't know if you can see that. I can see that. So I assume that means you guys comment a lot if you're a top fan. So thank you for commenting always. We appreciate it. Duran asks, will the Packers offense get the running game going early on Sunday? They have to. That's a huge part of how they set up their offense to find success. They want to get Aaron Jones going early. They want to get Jamaal Williams when he's in there. They want to get those guys going early to help set up and establish the pass game as well. What needs to happen this weekend on Sunday against Carolina that didn't happen against LA?
Well, they need to stick with it. They need to, if you're facing a 2nd and 10, sometimes you have to run the ball. 3rd and 6, sometimes you got to try to draw play or something that can keep the defense honest, because you can't go in a game and run 13 times. It's just not really a way to win games. And it's proven that the more Rodgers has to throw, the less chance they have of winning. He's always better when they have a decent run game. I think they just sort of lost track of, they gotten some bad down and distances, and instead of trying to gradually get out of those holes, they kept going for it in one shot. And then when they wouldn't get it, it would leave them 3rd and 15 or something like that. And I think they're going to have to be much more reliant. Carolina is not as good against the run as they are in the pass. They lead the league in sacks. They are number 2 in interceptions, I think. So it's hard to throw on them. You're going to need to try to run on them. And I think we'll see a fair amount of Jamaal Williams and Aaron Jones in the same backfield, I would guess.
I would think so. We've seen it a lot so far this season. So we've got a question here from Tao. Flip it over to the defense here. Packers defense is getting destroyed by tight ends, other than Martinez and a safety. What else can they try? They've been facing some very good tight ends. They'll continue to face a good tight end this week against San Francisco. They're going to see George Kittle. It's just a really impressive group of tight ends that the Packers have had to face the last couple of weeks, going forward these next couple of weeks as well. What can they try to do to cover some of these bigger guys? I know Darnell Savage Jr. has played a role in the coverage of those bigger body tight ends. What do you see the Packers doing going forward?
Well, one of the things I think they've got to do is start manhandling some of these tight ends at the line of scrimmage. Now, some of them line up, as wide receivers, but when those guys are over next to the tackles, I think they've got to get somebody up there and start jamming them and get them off their routes and be really physical with them. Maybe it's Preston Smith who has to do that, because he's also able to run with tight ends. Now, you don't want him covering tight ends all the time, but if he's going to sit there and jam the guy and give him all kinds of business at the line of scrimmage, then I might have more confidence in him doing that. Maybe they need a big safety up there like Ibraheim Campbell to jam him. I think you have to be really physical with today's tight ends. Otherwise, they're just going to have free releases, and it's like having another wide receiver on the field.
So something we didn't mention at the top of the show, you mentioned Ibraheim Campbell. He practiced today for the first time since officially coming off of PUP. The Packers released Tim Williams. They brought up Campbell in his spot. Now, how realistic do you think it is that Campbell will get some snaps, make an impact on this defense? How long do you think it will take for him to get fully incorporated back into Mike Pettine's game plan?
I expect him to play Sunday. I expect him to play a decent amount. I don't know how it'll take him a while to have an impact, but he came in here last year without having played a snap in the defense. In 3 games, had 20 tackles and a forced fumble and a pass breakup. I think he can, in moderation, I think he can help them. I think he can be a guy who helps the run game a little bit, allows them to play a nickel or dime defense and then also be able to play the run. I don't think you can play him 60 snaps. He's going to be darn sore if you do. But I would look for him to have a fairly significant role on Sunday.
So speaking of guys that have returned recently from injury, Kurt wants to know, will Jace get some reps on Sunday? Or I don't know if you're asking, did Jace get reps on Sunday last Sunday? So Jace Sternburger came off of IR. He was very briefly, I believe, he was active for the game on Sunday. Very briefly, Matt LaFleur sent him out with both Mercedes Lewis and Jimmy Graham. So 3 tight ends on the field. And then there was some sort of penalty that brought the offense back a handful of yards, and Sternburger came off.
Yeah.
So that was the only true offensive opportunity that Jace Sternburger had. Otherwise, we've been seeing him play on special teams. Do you think LaFleur will try to get him involved a little bit more on Sunday?
I don't think so. I think if Robert Tonyan is healthy, and it's taken him a while to get over this hip injury, if he's healthy, I think Sternberger's inactive. Tanyan's just more ready to play. Sternburger was active because if one of those tight ends went down, then they'd be down to 1 tight end. And he played that snap because they needed 3 tight ends in that particular formation. So to answer your question, no, I don't think he'll be playing much on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Guy is talking about in the comments right now how the Packers need to commit to stopping the run. This has been a sore spot for the Packers all season. When you look along the defensive line, I guess you could lump the outside linebackers sort of into that as well. What the Packers have right now, inside linebacker / that hybrid safety sort of nickel position that has been alongside Blake Martinez. Mm-hmm. Where do you start? Where do you point fingers? Can you point fingers at any position, any person in particular, as to why this defense has been struggling to stop the run this season?
I don't know if I can single out one person. I think the scheme has something to do with that. I think Mike Pettin chooses to replace one of the inside linebackers with a defensive back because he wants to be able to double team wide receivers, tight ends. He wants to have enough defensive backs on the field to be able to do that kind of thing. And he's willing to sacrifice. What he does is he puts 5 guys up on the line of scrimmage. And so you sort of have like 5 and 1 instead of 4 and 2. And you know, really philosophically, it should be the same. You're still covering the same gaps. But for whatever reason, their guys up front just have, you know, in recent times haven't been getting the job done. And then, you know, a lot of times they'll use the opposition will use a tight end and bring them in close. And then the Packers are kind of undermanned because they don't have another linebacker. I think if they had a second inside linebacker who could do everything, then they would play him. But they don't trust Oren Burks. It's pretty clear that that's the case. And B.J. Goodson can only play on first or second down because he really can't cover anybody. So they're very limited in what they can do there. I don't know what else. There's no panacea other than they have to play better. They can try to bring another safety down into the box, or they can try to get Oren Burks going. I don't know what they have to do that, but they certainly don't seem to trust him.
I don't know. This was something that Pete Doherty talked about in his chat today. I mean, the inside linebacker position, I'd imagine next season is going to be a big concern for Brian Gutekunst. He's going to have to make that decision whether or not he wants to bring back Blake Martinez. Mm-hmm. And right now, all signs are pointing to it might not be worth spending a lot of money to bring him back. What do you think about that position, and what do they need to look for going forward?
Well, you know, you don't want to spend a ton of money on inside linebackers. They're just not as important as they used to, but you do need you need to find someone who can cover, and that seems to be the most important part. But it's hard to, you know, it's really hard to define it because there just aren't that many Luke Kuechly's around. There's just not a lot of Bobby Wagners who can do everything. They can stay on the field and play the run, and they can cover. Blake Martinez, as much as people want to criticize him, he's a functional player, and there's a lot of teams who would like him. He's not a difference maker, but if they were playing a little bit better in front of him, then I think his stats would be even better. They have to figure out how to get a second guy who is really athletic and can cover. And that's what they thought Oren Burks was going to be. They've got to find another Oren Burks, except one who can get on the field.
Is the only indicator that Oren Burks isn't panning out the fact that the Packers aren't playing him? We haven't seen a whole lot of him play just because he's been injured.
Yeah, you tend to see when he plays, there's always a play here, a play there where he's out of his gap. He doesn't quite have his assignment down right. I don't think he's a real instinctive football player. He's really smart. I mean, that's not a problem. But there's certain guys who, Blake Martinez sees something, he reacts, he goes. Oren Burks has to get to that point somehow. And I know they're working on him with it, trying to get him playing faster. That's really what is keeping him on the bench.
Mm-hmm. Got a question here from Tim. Will Christian McCaffrey run for 200 yards on Sunday? What a number that would be.
I don't think he'll run for 200 yards, but I'll bet you he has 160, 180 total yards.
Okay.
Passing and rushing.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does that. Now, that's going to happen. So what the Packers have to do is eliminate everybody else. So if McCaffrey's going to get that yardage, you got to keep him out of the end zone and negate everybody else. And I think you can win that way. He had a pretty decent numbers against San Francisco, and they got killed, 51-13 or something like that. So you just have to make his yardage it can't end up in the end zone. You got to keep him out of the end zone.
And the way that the Packers defense has been playing the last couple of weeks, where it's been a big emphasis on bend but don't break. They're giving up a lot of yards, but when it comes time to the red zone, they're keeping them out of the end zone. Is that a sustainable model? Is that something that they can do against Carolina and still find success?
I thought it was a sustainable model, but it's only a sustainable model if your offense is scoring points. And so when that didn't happen against the Chargers, it was not. It was great that they were holding them to field goals, but they needed to get the offense more plays, and they weren't doing that. So, in a game where the offense is playing well and they're giving up yards, but they're not giving up touchdowns, that's very sustainable. You can win games that way. But, they're not playing where this last game was not a game where the defense was complementing the offense and the offense was complementing the defense.
I know Matt LaFleur's motto, or an overheard thing that he said a couple of games ago, I think. I don't remember which game it was. Something that he said on the sideline was all gas, no break. I think there might been there was an expletive in there as well. But I would argue that there was a lot of break in that offense last weekend and not a whole lot of gas.
Yeah.
There just wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot to work with, and there were a lot of penalties. And when you're in those third and long scenarios, which they were most of the time, it's hard to convert those.
But I think they were, at times, their own worst enemy, too. I think they kept thinking, as I said earlier, that, okay, you got third down. Let's say it's 1st and 15, after a false start penalty. Well, get 5 running or get 5 on a quick pass, and then try to get 4 or 5 after that. And then, whittle it down so that your third downs aren't 3rd and 10. That's what kills you. You need to get it down to 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. And they just didn't have the patience to do that. They kept, Rodgers was looking for the big play that would turn the momentum around, and it never happened.
Yeah, 2 for 10 on third down's not really going to do it for you, is it?
No.
All right, Spoon. Any final words for our lovely viewers on this cold, snowy? Hopefully you're somewhere where it's not cold and snowing.
Yeah.
Is all I have to say.
Just thought this is a really critical game for them. They don't want to go in the bye with a loss, 2 in a row, and then having to face San Francisco coming out of the bye. They need to salvage one of the 3 games in this period. And it's going to be really hard to win at San Francisco, so this is the game they really need to win. And we'll see how much they buckle down and learn from the last game.
Absolutely, and their home record has been pretty phenomenal so far. I believe 4-1 so far at home this season, so, it should be, that at least is in their favor. There's a lot right now coming off of this last game that they're going to have to sort through to find success on Sunday.
Yep.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We will be live again tomorrow on Thursday, as well as Friday leading up to the game against Carolina. So make sure you're coming back to Packers News, all of our social channels, wherever you're watching us. We always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you're checking out PackersNews.com for all of your Packers News. Exactly why it's called Packers News. Very convenient. You'll never forget what we're here for.